Alright, how's it going? Wyatt Knox here at the Team O'Neill Rally School again. Just wanted to give you guys a quick overview of some of the cars, the real rally cars. If you're looking at building a rally car, if you just want to build yourself a street car that'll survive the end of the world, whatever it might be, this is the kind of thing that you're dealing with. So we're just going to give you a quick walk around. This is one of the cars that we built here. We go through a bunch of these, but really it'd be the same whether you were putting together a two-wheel drive car like this, an all-wheel drive car, or really anything that you wanted to turn into a rally car or really ruggedize and make kind of bulletproof for its use on the street. So essentially, one of these vehicles compared to a normal race car, it's pretty simple. One of the things that you're dealing with a rally car is getting it ready for long hours and lots of abuse over rough roads. So you can take a look at this one over here that we've got taken apart, and you can see some of the stuff that we do to these cars is really just to simplify. So you'll see not a whole lot of really super fancy parts as far as high speed stuff, but one of the things in this one that's really easy to tell here, the very heavy duty suspension and braking parts. So if you were looking at building yourself really any kind of racing car, one of the most important things is getting yourself a really heavy duty suspension. If you're going autocrossing, if you're doing track days, you're going to pick something different probably than what you would use in a rally car. These rally shock absorbers and springs are big, mean, heavy duty things, and you know, a street car, just putting this suspension on it is going to make it massively more capable as far as driving high speed on rough roads and that sort of thing. This is a Riger external reservoir setup, and it's very adjustable as far as ride height, compression, rebound, everything else. But that's one of the first things that most people do, and rightly so, when you're getting into this sport or just driving down the road. Just switching in some really heavy-duty suspension will get you around a lot better than a normal car will. And then obviously brakes. Because, you know, races are of course won by horsepower, but a lot of times the fastest guys are the guys that are coming into corners the fastest, braking the latest, balancing the car using the brakes, getting the weight transfer they want. There's a huge amount of braking involved with any kind of racing, rally racing specifically, where you're doing a lot of left foot braking. It's critical to have, you know, good brake calipers that give you a lot of clamping force, the right choice of brake pad. These ones you can see it's very easy to change brake pads. Your normal brake job, you'd have to take this whole caliper off. In this case, you can just pull this pin, pull your brake pads, put new ones in, stick the pin back, and you're good to go again. So really simple setup, and then a big vented disc brake like this. You can see this has massive vents in it. You've probably seen a lot of these brake discs that are cross drilled, like somebody took a drill and went all through here and it helps dissipate heat. That's wonderful on the track, but for a rally application you end up getting stones and a lot of debris and stuff, dirt and gravel stuck into those cross drilled spots, and as it's whizzing around it chews up your brake pad and the whole thing goes kind of pear-shaped pretty quick. So we stay away from those. If you're looking at different brake discs for a rally car, don't go with the cross drilled option. You'll see other ones that are slotted. Stay away from those too. Those will trap dirt and pebbles and crap, and as it's going around it'll chew up your brake pad, and then you're gonna have a bad day. So really just a heavy duty vented, longitudinally I suppose, brake disc like this is kind of what you're looking for. There's a lot of different options. Most people will look at, oh, you know, hey, I've got a Ford Fiesta. What is the best brake setup I can get as far as the Ford product line? So you might find if you buy a Fiesta SE or something like that, a base model car so that it's lightweight, you can probably find some brakes from either a higher model Fiesta or a Fiesta ST or even a Focus or something like that. You can play around and you can find something that's going to work well for you, and it won't break the bank. The sky is the limit. These are AP Racing brakes. These are incredible brakes. I mean, you've seen stuff from Brembo and everybody else that makes them. So yeah, but definitely if you're getting into this, suspension, brakes, brake lines are very important in a rally car when you're driving around. just because of the pure abuse that these things take. As the suspension's traveling up and down, the amount of flex that they go through, and the amount of kind of rough debris and sharp stones and things that are thrashing around in this wheel well, you really need stainless braided brake lines, and these have several layers of protection on them. It's a stainless braided line with a layer of plastic protection with an additional heat-proof layer here where it's near the brakes and everything else, to really keep this brake line from coming apart, because that's obviously going to be a bad day if that happens to you. So suspension, brakes, everything else like that. This one, the engine's out for a rebuild, but let's pop the hood on this one and we'll see what we've got going on. Realistically, you know, unless you're rallying at some of the higher levels, there's not a whole lot you need to do. And even at the higher levels, this is a car that's capable of winning two-wheel drive national at any rally in North America, and really engine work is pretty minimal. This thing's got, you know, it's got a high-speed ECU, it's got different engine mapping, which is just the tune on the engine. It's got the rev limiter is changed, and it's got some different stuff going on in here, but really nothing too fancy. This is really just a 1.6 liter 4-cylinder engine. It does have pistons from M Sport in the UK. It's got some headwork done to it. It's got bigger cams in it, obviously an intake and things like that. Big beefy motor mounts are crucially important. Something like this is going to be much more heavy duty than what you would find, because as you're driving on a rough road, especially accelerating, especially over washboard bumps, or we call them turtle bumps sometimes, but you've seen them on dirt roads where the car's hopping, this engine's moving around. Breaking an engine mount, essentially what happens is your engine, and transmission in this case, comes free from the body at one mount or another, and this whole thing starts moving around, and it's going to have a bad time, really. It's going to pull a fuel line off and cause a fire. It's going to pull some other lines off and cause the engine to stop or overheat, or who knows what. It's a bad day. Do really good engine mounting where you can, and you're good to go. Air filters, you see a lot of we call them K&N style, but really any cone style air filter can be a problem, because what you're dealing with in rally an awful lot is water and dust. So those air filters do let more air in, but they also let other stuff in. So that's why this one has a big cone filter, but you can see this whole setup that it's got, just keeping it more protected. Keeping it so that if you do drive through, you know, you splash through a river, you splash through a bunch of big puddles, you're driving around in a lot of dust, this is always getting clean, dry air to it, because a lot of times the environment is going to conspire against you. You've probably seen, you know, the amount of dust that you're driving through is going to clog up a filter pretty well, and certainly getting water into your engine is never a good thing. But really, you know, is not a whole lot going on as far as high speed stuff in here. The engine, sometimes if you have the option, you would want a higher output alternator, depending on what kind of electronics you're running in the car, specifically lights. Some of the new LED lights that are out there are really great. They use up very little power, they put out a ton of light, but still a higher amp alternator. Again, if you get a base model car, often you'll find a more luxury version of that maybe, or within the same manufacturer. It's not like you have to go buy a racing alternator. You just find one that's a little higher output and you go with that. The cooling system is another factor. This one, it's hard to see. I don't know if you can sneak in here and take a look, but there is a thin wire mesh over the whole radiator. There's actually one over here we can take a look at right on the bench. And this is something that's actually quite important to do for a rally specific purpose, or potentially off-road or desert racing or anything like that. Again, it's just the amount of debris that, you know, you're driving through, whether you're catching another car and he's kicking up rocks and dust and sticks and who knows what in front of you, and all of that stuff's going to be hitting your radiator. That's a bad thing. You'll get the radiator clogged and your car might overheat. You'll get some kind of a projectile that goes through the radiator, leak all your fluid out, and you overheat and blow your motor. So for a bunch of different reasons, it doesn't hurt your airflow much at all. Get a good heavy duty wire mesh like this over the radiator. One other thing you can see that we do here, and I'd recommend highly that you do yourself as well, is kind of just the modularity of this. So this whole radiator shroud, this front piece that bolts to the front frame rails, your cooling fan, this push bar on the front that protects everything that we make, that your light bar bolts onto, this all comes off of the car with just a few bolts off the frame rail. There's another one on the ground here. So you can see why we do this. Really, this bumper cover itself pops off pretty easily, which is very nice to be able to just pull into service if you have an issue. Pop that bumper cover off, and then having it set up so that it's slightly modular. This is a different setup. This is the stock bumper beam, where that one's a tube, but really you can see it's the same thing, where if you have a problem, you can get this whole piece out of the way, and then really your car is going to look like the other one over there, where the whole engine bay is open and you've got access to everything. So that's really nice to be able to do. Under the hood here, before we close this up, there's really not a whole lot else to talk about. It's pretty basic. The one other addition that we do that's optional, this is one of the Fiesta R2s. This car has a sequential transmission. So with this vehicle, you don't need to use the clutch to shift. You really only use the clutch off the start line if you want to get going. Once you're moving, you can shift without using the clutch. It's got a flat shift feature, so you don't even need to let off the gas when you're shifting up. You can just keep your right foot flat on the floor and go wah, ga, 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 up through the gears. So that's a very heavy duty unit, but that's optional. You know, we do R1 builds, we do other builds, and certainly if you're in one of the more production style classes, you've got the normal transmission. That's what you're working with. The world's a happy place. Sometimes you can get a better clutch. A stronger clutch is really nice to be able to have. A conventional clutch is built a little more for comfort than high-speed abuse, but really, you know, again, the sky's the limit there with that sort of stuff. But a standard transmission with a pretty flesh clutch in it should be more than enough to get you around kind of where you need to go. Let me put this thing up on the lift real quick and show you a few of the features that we do underneath to protect the car. Alright, so this is where a rally car is going to kind of branch off from the normal race car world and into its own thing a little bit, because the undercarriage of this vehicle takes such abuse that it needs, you know, a lot of protection to be able to get through stuff without you know, damaging some of these components and falling apart. So starting at the front of the car here, what you see is this skid plate support right here, and then there's a few other mounting points on the subframe right here, because if you're running without a skid plate, all of this stuff is vulnerable. So a skid plate is basically a large sheet of, in this case, 1/4 inch high-grade aluminum, and the goal of this thing is to sit underneath here so that as you're racing around and doing whatever you're doing, all of, where do we land? It lands essentially somewhere around here, and the idea is that all of the fragile components of the engine and transmission and all of those fragile pieces and moving things are protected from the abuse of driving down the road, and you can see how much abuse this thing takes. So maybe not necessarily on your daily driver, but certainly if you were rally crossing, or even if you live around here, you know, a decent skid plate like this is really nice to have. Any one of these impacts could have put a hole in your oil pan, you leak all your oil out, blow your engine up, have a bad day, crack a transmission case. We've got this bar here that also protects the bottom of your radiator. I mean, if you crash this thing into a snowbank, or even without a skid plate, and you take a big impact, it's going to go right through this plastic, and your radiator is going to be the first thing that hits. So, because the skid plate curls up and around, that's a pretty happy thing. So, you know, sliding a car into a ditch, or getting stuck, or driving on a rocky road or a bumpy road, a skid plate is going to save your butt big time. One thing with skid plates that's really important, if your skid plate is at a level where it's a few inches below your oil pan, as it should be. What we see happen surprisingly often is a rock will somehow get itself wedged between the skid plate and the oil pan, and then when you take an impact, it punches that rock through the oil pan. So if you have a skid plate made, or you build one yourself, or whatever you decide to do, you steal a road sign and bolt it underneath your Subaru, this piece of foam or a similar piece of foam is really very, very nice to have, because the oil pan, you can see, smushes right here just a little bit. This is that mount, and looks like the transmission case a little right there, but this keeps a rock from getting in between the skid plate and the oil pan, and then when you take an impact, you put a hole in the oil pan and your day's over, even though you've done all this stuff. These little flappers right here are also very nice. These, when you put the skid plate on, just 4 big bolts. This mounts to the car and it keeps debris like those kinds of rocks from flying up in here, and other things from getting around your skid plate and into kind of the fragile workings of your car. You've got CV boots. These things, if they tear, it's going to be ugly, and some other pieces in here that obviously you don't want to damage. So good skid plate should be pretty important. Moving down the car, what we do here, and again, you know, for a racing car would be highly recommended, these are Kevlar underbody protection pieces. So with a front wheel drive car or a 4-wheel drive car, it's actually shocking. That gravel spray that comes off of the front tires is like the worst sandblaster you can imagine. So having good, rugged, strong mud flaps will help deflect those rocks down, but even so, having all of those rocks pounding the bottom of your car will literally wear holes in your floor. Your thickness of your floor it just starts getting thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner until there's no floor left in your car. Also, just, you know, going into a ditch or driving over, if you had to drive over a log or through a riverbed or something, this is going to be much better. It won't smash the floor pan up and dent the whole body shell and kind of ruin things. It keeps it all in one piece and much, much nicer. Exhaust system is all very simple. You know, it's basically just make sure it's in here really, really well, and it's ventilated, it's not overheating, and you're good to go. These are what we call flaps, horizontal flaps, but basically the idea with these, it's missing on this side, you can see the difference, is if you're driving over rocks and debris and other stuff here, you know, it's going to skip off of here, it'll deflect off of these things and pass down and out of the car. Where if you look at this side, which doesn't have that flap there, you've got a lot of pieces here. There are brake lines, there's some wires, there's your rear axle beam, which might not get damaged, there's your exhaust, there's some other stuff, you know, who knows, but really protecting the whole back of your car with these guys, you can see, is a pretty good idea. As long as you don't cover the exhaust too much and melt stuff and catch on fire, you're good to go. Fuel tank. Critically important. Again, this is a Kevlar fuel tank shield, and you know, you wouldn't want to really do a rally without one. You can put a fuel cell inside your car and get rid of the tank, but you know, having your center of gravity as low as possible is always a nice thing. Leaving the stock tank and, you know, having your gauge work and all of that silly stuff is just easier. The fuel pumps and everything else that are in there work great, so why fix it if it's not broken? But really, you want to protect that. A plastic fuel tank will eventually wear out. A steel fuel tank, or you know, is going to dent or tear or rip when it takes impacts with stuff. So for sure, protect the heck out of your fuel tank if you want to keep going for a while. Other than that, the back of the vehicle, it's all very kind of standard stuff. You can see the original fuel tank in here. Underneath, this is an additional piece that we bolt on with the same basically stock mounting locations, and that's fine. This exhaust, again, is in here really strongly. In this case, it's got a catalytic converter towards the rear of the car, which is always nice just because of heat. You'll see a lot of race cars and rally cars specifically where the catalytic converter is the last thing on the end. There are some noise restrictions. You don't need a muffler necessarily to go rallying. This one's got one just because it's a little more peaceful, but you know, a lot of times you'll see a rally car have a straight pipe all the way back. catalytic converter right here on the back part that keeps the heat and all the mess away from everything, and super easy to replace. You can see what's going on. The world's a happy place. You can see again this rider suspension is all adjustable, big springs in the back. That's pretty happy. This is a light little front wheel drive car. One of the things that's really neat about these cars, and again different from a normal racing car, this is a wheel scraper. And the idea with this is, as you're driving down the road, if there's debris that gets trapped in here, this wheel scraper chucks it out, and it keeps the inside of your wheels from building up with gravel and mud and chaos, because that adds a lot of weight. It throws your wheels out of balance dramatically, and really another factor of it is if you start getting rocks built up, especially in here by this brake caliper, that's where you're going to have a failure. You know, if there's rocks and mud and sand and pebbles getting stuck between the wheel and the brake caliper, it can wear out your brake caliper. I've also seen a rock get stuck in there, and as the wheel turns, it's like a lathe and it cuts the wheel in half the long way. It sounds silly, but it happens. Another reason to use, you know, a rally wheel like this, we get these from M Sport in the UK, but it's a very heavy duty wheel. It's much heavier than what you would put on a normal racing car if you were going to go out on the track. But that means it's going to take that abuse. It's not going to bend when you hit stuff. It's not going to break when you hit stuff. You really have to do something very, very silly to damage one of these wheels. It happens, but it's pretty rare, and you know, you've basically crashed your car at that point or hit a massive rock. Rally tires, we've got another video on rally tires. You can check that out. These ones are, let's see, a D-Mac directional rally tire that's pretty well worn. Not a ton to talk about here, but basically, you know, you can go check out that video, but you're not going to get rocks stuck in the bead. You're not going to get flat tires nearly as much. These are going to last a lot longer and give you the grip that you need on a rough road. Or like I said, if you've just got a street car that you need to drive through, you know, horrible terrain, whether you live out in the boonies or you're building like a light non-standard tactical vehicle or whatever you might be doing, rally tires are way better and way, way stronger than anything else you're going to find in a normal passenger car size. So, you know, if you're building yourself up for the end of the world, having some rally tires around isn't necessarily a bad thing. These guys are really just, again, more Kevlar protection to keep a lot of the rock chips. You know, that's where you get a lot of damage from the rock spray off of the front tires. And yeah, it just keeps the car a little nicer, a little fresher. We've got pin stands in these cars. These are really nice. As you know, you're servicing the vehicle out in the wild, you don't always have a nice handy lift like we've got here. So we've got these pin stands that are a really stable jack stand way. The jack stand, essentially, it's tall, it slides into there, you put the car down on it. I think this one's on pin stands. Yeah, this one's on pin stands, so take a quick look. But really, this just makes it super easy. You know, I can push on this car and tweak it around, and it's very, very safe, is the nice thing. If you have to be getting under the car and working on it, that's a really great way to do it. Alright, so the inside of a rally car like this is very similar to what you're going to find in most racing cars. You know, high strength roll cage welded in. Each different racing series has its own specifics on materials and location of the pipes and bends and things. So, you know, either get a roll cage installed by a certified installer like us, or if you're going to build your own, make sure you read the rule book and everything else so you don't screw that up and build an illegal race car. But pretty basic. You know, the rest of the inside of this, it's really just about removing everything you can, making everything as light and simple as you can. So you see this dashboard is very lightweight. It's a flocked dashboard, which is a process of, you know, we put some glue spray on here, and then there's a material that we add on. It just cuts the glare. Glare from the sun off the dashboard. You get your shiny Armor All dashboard in the afternoon sun heading west or whatever. It's an ugly thing. So, you know, we just kill off that. And then, you know, just getting all of the basic stuff right. We've got a bigger brake pedal. This car and most rally cars, you're going to be left foot braking a lot, and especially with this sequential transmission, you just don't need to use the clutch. So your left foot's on the brake, your right foot's on the gas, you go through the rally stage, and that's how it goes. So having that and some non-slip tape on there is also a nice feature, so your feet aren't sliding around. You know, it's another thing with rally cars. You can imagine your feet are going to be muddy or dirty or snowy or wet a lot more than a normal racing car if you were at the track on a nice sunny day. And then really, you know, fire suppression, we've got a small battery in the back, a lot of things have been moved to the inside, the washer reservoir, and some of the other things that you have here are all pretty basic. You know, something rally specific, again, a spare tire mount. This car can carry 2 spare tires. One of them would strap in here and the other one would strap in the back. You've got an impact gun and a jack right there. This impact gun actually runs the jack as well, so you can put the jack under the car. It takes this socket, so and the car picks up. You make it very easy to change a flat. It's got an onboard fire suppression system as well as the fire extinguisher that's in the front, which is really nice. A bit of a toolkit here, which also contains a spill kit in case you spill fluids in the forest and you need to be able to clean that up. You've got some more tools in your door stowed right there. And with this stuff, just make sure that, you know, you carry the minimum of what you think you might need with some tools and spare parts, and make sure it's strapped in, you know, very securely. If this is 20 pounds and comes loose of its mountings, then it becomes a projectile pretty quickly, especially in a crash. And we've got a first aid kit, which I don't know if you can sneak around and take a look at, but it's pretty basic. I can open the trunk too. You know, your first aid kit, hopefully you never need it, but mandatory to carry in all the race cars, same thing. Just make sure it's mounted in really nice and securely. And yeah, that's the basics of a racing car, or a rally car specifically. You do have an intercom because, you know, hey, compared to a normal race car, we've got 2 seats, and there's an intercom system that allows the driver to be able to talk to the co-driver without the all of the road noise, so it's easy for them to communicate. And yeah. That's the basics of rally cars. Thanks for watching. Come on out to the Team O'Neill Rally School. You can check out a bunch of these things, drive some race cars, do whatever you want. If you want, we can build you one of these guys, or you can buy one. And yeah, thanks for watching and have a good one.